The 15th century marked a turning point in Africa's history. European explorers, driven by a thirst for new lands and riches, arrived on African shores. They brought with them more than just their ambitions. They carried the weight of a new faith, Christianity. This marked the beginning of a complex and often tumultuous relationship between Africa and Christianity. Initially, the spread of Christianity was slow and met with resistance. Many Africans held fast to their traditional beliefs and ways of life. However, the Europeans were persistent, using a combination of persuasion, coercion, and exploitation to advance their religious and colonial agendas. The arrival of Christianity in Africa was intricately linked to the broader context of European exploration and expansion. It became a tool, sometimes subtly, sometimes brutally, for the penetration of Western influence into the heart of the continent. The European presence in Africa soon evolved from exploration to exploitation. Trade became a powerful instrument of control, with European nations vying for access to Africa's resources and markets. This period saw the rise of the transatlantic slave trade, a horrific chapter in human history that would leave an indelible mark on both Africa and the Americas. The Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885 formalized the scramble for Africa. European powers carved up the continent among themselves, paying little heed to existing ethnic boundaries or the aspirations of the African people. Christianity was often used as a justification for this land grab, with some Europeans believing it was their duty to civilize and Christianize the dark continent. The intertwined forces of trade, colonization, and religious conversion created a potent mix that would have profound and lasting consequences for Africa. It was a system designed to benefit the colonizers, often at the expense of the colonized. The transatlantic slave trade stands as one of the most horrific crimes against humanity in history. Millions of Africans were forcibly uprooted from their homes, subjected to unimaginable brutality, and shipped across the Atlantic to labor on plantations in the Americas. This forced migration led to the devastation of families and communities, the disruption of social structures, and the loss of countless lives. The slave trade was justified by some European Christians using biblical interpretations that dehumanized Africans. This created a distorted and dangerous theology that fueled the slave trade and its associated atrocities. The scars of this dark chapter continue to haunt the African psyche and are a stark reminder of the human capacity for cruelty. As Christianity spread across Africa, it often clashed with existing indigenous belief systems. Missionaries, often driven by a genuine yet misguided sense of purpose, sought to replace traditional African religions and practices with Christianity. They viewed traditional beliefs as pagan or heathen and actively worked to suppress them. Traditional rituals, ceremonies, and spiritual leaders were often denigrated and discouraged. This led to the erosion of cultural practices, the loss of traditional knowledge, and the weakening of social cohesion within many African communities. The imposition of Christianity often led to the suppression of indigenous languages, art forms, and cultural expressions. The consequences of this cultural assault are still felt today, as many African nations grapple with the challenge of reclaiming their pre-colonial identities and rebuilding their cultural heritage. The legacy of colonialism and its intertwined relationship with Christianity continues to shape the African continent in multifaceted ways. The arbitrary borders drawn during the colonial era have left many African nations grappling with ethnic tensions and political instability. The imposition of Western education systems, often designed to serve colonial interests, has at times created a disconnect between the knowledge imparted in schools and the realities of African societies. The influence of Western cultural norms, often spread through missionary schools and institutions, has contributed to a sense of cultural alienation among some Africans. The colonial legacy continues to present challenges for Africa in its pursuit of self-determination, economic development, and cultural revival.